everyone and welcome to another video. My name is Ellie and as most of you already know, I recently finished a 1600-mile long thru-hike across Britain with my dog Otto. And today I want to answer some of your questions about long-distance hiking with a dog, the trail itself, resupply, a few more things. So let's jump right in. Before starting, I just want to say a quick thank you for all your nice comments on my last video, which was the last episode of our JoGLE series, and I really appreciate your feedback, the kind words, and that really was so special. So thank you so much. For the questions, I just separated them into different groups because there were a couple of questions that have been asked several times. First off, someone asked why JoGLE of all the routes? And a related question, why I decided to go north to south. That's an interesting question. I've hiked in the UK a lot of times before and I just love the hiking community and the terrain. It's not too technical, it's not too hot in summer compared to parts of Southern Europe. So yeah, it was for me, I wanted to do another long distance hike in the UK, and I've had different trails that I wanted to do, but I decided to do JoGLE because of the length, because I wanted to do something that's a bit longer than just a couple of 100 miles. So yeah, that came to mind, and also the aspect of hiking the length of a country from the northernmost to the southernmost point. That yeah, I just found it interesting, and I decided to go north to south for a couple of reasons. One, the midges situation in Scotland in summer, because I knew if I would have started in spring in Land's End, I would have been at the peak of the midge season in Scotland, and I just wanted to avoid those because I've hiked in Scotland before and they can be really nasty. So yeah, I wanted to avoid those. Also, depending on our hiking pace, I knew that we would potentially arrive in Scotland during the hunting season. And I don't know if I've talked on here about that before, but Otto is really sensitive when it comes to shooting noises and he's really scared of them. So I wanted at all costs to avoid those, even if they're far away, but still if he hears the sound, he completely freezes and he's so afraid. And I just wanted to avoid them if possible. And the last reason is because I just love the southwest coast path. I've hiked it last year with Otto, and yeah, it just felt right because the trail changed so much for me, and it just felt right to do the first bit of the coast path again as the grand finale, and I've really enjoyed that. So for me, that just made sense. Then related to that, which trail would you walk again? A lot of the trails. Probably my least favorite right now would be the Pennine Way. It was really beautiful, but it just didn't click like it did with a lot of other trails. So probably that would be my least favorite, but still I would love to do it again too. But a trail that that's really high up on my list is definitely the Offa's-Dyke path. Because if you followed our vlogs, we've had some really rubbish weather while we did the Offa's-Dyke path, but it was so beautiful. There's so much variation. The landscape changes every few miles and I really like that. There's everything. And another trail that I didn't have on my list before, to be honest, is the Southern Upland Way in Scotland, basically the Scottish coast to coast. We only hiked a bit as part of our JoGLE, but I was so surprised by how beautiful it is, because if it comes to Scotland, most people, and me included, just know the highlands and the beauty of the highlands, but the lowlands are really stunning too, so that would definitely a trail that I would love to do as a whole. Then another question, the days you've numbered. I think that means the numbers in my vlog. Did that include rest days? No, that was just the walking days in total. I miscalculated in the vlogs, but at the end, when I calculate the whole distance, we hiked for 117 days, and we have had about 11 rest days. That includes, for example, days where we explored Bristol and Edinburgh, just a couple of cities along the way, but also to catch up on editing and yeah, just resting. And then we've had about 12 or 14 days of forced rest days that I wouldn't have taken otherwise because of my foot problems and other injuries like my finger at the end. So yeah, that was just the walking days. Then the next question, actually there were a few people that asked that. I'd like to know what kind of budget was needed for food, campsites, hotel stays. Related to that, how much did you spend on accommodation per week? And can you give an idea of cost for such a trip? I set myself a budget of around 200 to 250 pounds per week. And for most weeks that worked out really well. On average, I would spend around 10 to 15 pounds per day on food, and then if I went to a campsite, around 10 to 15 pounds for that. And obviously for a hotel that's much more, but then again there were days where I spent nothing if I wild camped and still had food from the day before, so it's hard to give a specific amount for each day, but on average I spend around 200 pounds a week, sometimes a bit more and a lot of times a bit less. And then related to that too, accommodation and cost too, do you book accommodation ahead of time or just turn up and hope there's room? For hotels and Airbnbs, I always book them ahead, as much ahead as I can. That being said, with a dog you can never plan too much ahead, so for hotels or Airbnbs I usually book them 2 to 5 days in advance, because oftentimes hotels that allow dogs only have a specific number of rooms where they allow dogs, so if they're gone, they're gone. And if I knew I needed or wanted to go to a hotel, I tried to book as early as possible. For campsite I never booked ahead, just turned up and it was always fine. And I didn't need to book ahead, not even in the summer month on a campsite, so yeah, that was really easy. Then another big topic that I was asked several times is food and drinking water. How easy was it to source suitable food for both you and Otto? How you handled resupplying Otto with food and how many days worth of food you typically carried? How did you arrange your supply parcels? What was the average food you would carry between towns? And would you make a point of carrying an extra day's worth of food as an emergency? For Otto, I've talked about that in my one of my first videos, my resupply and preparation video. I talked about that. Otto is a little food sensitive, so I've tried not to change his diet too much, so that I wanted him to have as much of the food that he's used to as possible, which meant I sent myself, before setting off for the trail, I sent myself a couple of resupply parcels with dog food for him to a hotel I knew I would be staying, or a campsite that was willing to hold them for me, or sometimes a post office. So for Otto's food I picked up a resupply parcel every 10 days to 2 weeks, so I always carried that amount of food. But since he's not that big of a dog, it wasn't that heavy, so usually I carried around 1.5 to 2 kilograms max worth of food for him, and yeah, that was fine. It's a bit of organization, but as I said, I just want to make sure that he has the food that he's used to. When it comes to my food, I always carry 1 day worth of food as an emergency, usually porridge and one of those dehydrated backpacker meals that have around 800 to 1000 calories and a little bit of nuts or energy bars, so I always keep them at the bottom of my pack as an emergency, because especially if you're hiking with a dog, it's not just about you, so there can be days where you still have a lot of energy, but your dog's tired and you have to stop earlier than expected, so that's why I always carry 1 day worth of food for me. On the trail itself, it really depends. For the first stages in Scotland that were really remote and where we didn't come across a shop or anything to buy food for 7 to 10 days, I obviously carried a lot of food. The maximum was 7 days at a time that I carried in Scotland, but the more I hiked south, the easier it was. Like on the Pennine Way, I oftentimes carried, depending on the location, 2 to 4 days worth of food. Same with Wales. And then in Somerset and on the coast path, I only carried about 1 to 2 days, depending on the area. When it comes to finding food, I think it's really easy. I'm a vegan. In the UK it's really easy to find vegan food, so I've never had any problems. I ate a lot of hummus and wraps and nut butter, and yeah, that's really easy to find almost everywhere, and I didn't have any problems. Last question on this topic is drinking water. That also depends on the area. In Scotland I found it very easy to find drinking water because there's water everywhere. There's streams, there's everything. So it was really, really easy. I did carry a filter with me, so yeah, just never had any problems finding water there. But the more south I got, it was a bit more difficult to find water. For example, on the Pennine Way, normally I would have found probably a lot of water sources there, and it's most areas are a bit higher up, so there's no pollution from farmland or anything, but there was a heat wave and everything, even the moorland, was basically dried up, so it was really hard finding water there. I mainly filled up from pubs and taps, and I also asked on farms and houses, and I've never had a problem finding drinking water, but the more south I got, the less I've drank from streams or filtered from streams, because everything was dried up, and that was a thing mainly in the south of England, that if streams are near farmland or even below farmland, I didn't drink from those streams. I mean, I would in an emergency, but most filters don't filter pesticides or chemicals. I've never had to rely on those streams, because especially on the coast path and in the south of England, where it's more densely populated, there's always something, a pub, a cafe, an outside tap, or just anything where you can get tap water. Next topic: how did you manage walking across fields with cows? I'm terrified when I have my dog with me. I'm terrified of cows too, because I had a scary incident on the coast path last year, and yeah, that really stuck with me. So I'm quite afraid of them too. But the hike cured me a little bit from that, because there were just so many fields of cows to go through, and at some point, yeah, it's just the normal thing what I always do. And before entering a field, I just watch the dynamic, because sometimes you can see that a herd of cows, they're already like in a really playful, or even it seems like that's probably not that, but they're fighting against each other and running towards each other. So I make sure to observe the dynamic and to see whether every cow's just on their own grazing, or if there's like something in the dynamic that feels off or strange to me. And if I don't feel comfortable, I walk around, and I did that. Sometimes that adds a lot of miles, so that's not always a great or easy solution, but I've did that when I just wasn't comfortable entering. What I found, and that's my personal exit strategy, I know that doesn't work for anyone, but for me it worked, because Otto is such a small dog. I found that if cows are interested or starting to follow us, or just being really inquisitive and nosy, I just pick him up, and I don't know why, but it feels like for them he disappears, even though I just carry him in my arms. But that helped me a lot of times, because for me, every time I did that, they just lost interest and just went away. I felt like they most of the times only attracted to Otto. So yeah, in case something's gets really strange, or I don't feel comfortable and I already entered the field, I just pick him up and carry him through the field, and that, for me, that helped a lot. The next question: was there ever a time on trail when you felt worried for your safety? No, there wasn't. And I know that will probably surprise some people, and I think especially as women, a lot of people are telling you, okay, it's probably not safe to be hiking alone. But for me, honestly, I've spent over 2 months in the UK hiking last year and 5 months this year. I've never had any problems. The fears I had, they were really more in my head, and if you read things on social media or something, obviously there are things that happen, then that can happen even in the remote outdoor areas, but the percentage is really low compared to more urbanized areas. So I actually feel really safe now. If you're doing it a couple of times, I feel like you're getting really empowered and lose a lot of those fears, and that's something that's really nice. The feeling of not being stopped by this. And maybe one thing that someone told me and that really helped me a lot, something that I do just for safety. If possible, I try to set up my tent and have no one see me set it up. Almost no one would approach a tent because there could be that there's a really big man with a weapon or something in there and just waiting to attack you. So what someone told me is that the person outside is oftentimes as afraid from the person inside as the other way around. So for me, what really helped is making sure whenever possible, that's not always possible, but I always try to set up the tent so that no one sees that it's me setting up the tent. And once the tent's up, and I can just go in, and then I feel really safe. So maybe that's something to help. A couple of questions about my foot problems. I thought that the plantar fasciitis would be a showstopper. I did too, honestly. I sensed that you were sick of speaking about it, but how long did it take to heal once you restarted? What did you do with your time when you were stuck at the campsite? The more I think about it, the more grim it sounds. That was a really hard time. If you followed the vlogs, you saw that I really struggled with plantar fasciitis, and I'm going to do a video soon, a specific video on that, how I managed to heal it and to overcome it, and it actually didn't come back. It went away really quickly, which is why I didn't talk about it anymore, because after, I spent a lot of days resting and exercising, and I'm going to talk about that in the specific video. I don't know, it just clicked. I found an exercise or a combination of exercise and new shoes, and it just went away. Basically, when it started to get better, it was gone in less than 48 hours. So I don't know if that was a miracle or something, or if it really was the exercises that I tried and tried and tried. But yeah, I'm going to talk about that in more detail. But yeah, the time on the campsite where I had to stop and rest, it was really hard, and I wanted to do a lot of things and catch up on editing, but to be honest, I wasn't in a great place mentally. I was so depressed, and it was really hard just not doing anything. So I didn't do that much, and I really focused on my recovery, doing exercises every day. So yeah, spent my time this way. Then another question, how do you take care of your feet during a hike? I always get a lot of blisters. Have tried different shoes and boots with the same results every time. How do you cope with blisters? What foot protocol would you recommend? One thing that I feel like really makes a difference is making sure that you always have a pair of dry socks. For me, I have one specific pair that I only, they're also hiking socks, but I always make sure to have one pair that's never getting wet. So I always have these for sleeping and just to change into, and that really makes a lot of difference, because if you have constant wet feet all the time, that's just more of a chance to get blisters and everything. Another thing that I'm doing is I also bring one pair of toe socks. So whenever I feel like I'm getting a hot spot or there's a blister forming or anything, I just change into my toe socks that keep the toes separated, and that really helps a lot. Other than that, I don't do anything specific to take care of my feet, to be honest. I always wear merino hiking socks that have a good amount of cushion. I love these from Darn Tough. They are really durable. Basically, you only have to buy 1 or 2 pairs, and whenever there's a hole in one, they just replace them for free, which is really amazing. So yeah, really can recommend these. And another thing, because I'm also really prone to blisters normally, but I didn't have a single blister on this entire hike, and I didn't have a blister for a couple of years actually when hiking. In other shoes, yes, but not when hiking. And that's because I've switched to trail running shoes. For hiking, I used these for the first part of my hike. They're from Topper Athletic, the MT4, and I really like those. But the cushion was gone, and I think that's also why my foot problems started, which is why I switched to the Ultra Olympus 5, because the Topper Athletic were just hard to get in the UK, and I made the switch to the Ultra shoes. They're also trail running shoes, and as you can see, they have a really wide toe box, which is something that's very important, I think, for me to prevent blisters, so that your feet really can like spread out and not be like cramped in there. They have a really good amount of cushion, as you can see, and they are really comfortable, so I can recommend both of these, the Ultra Olympus and also the Topo Athletic, and I've never had any problems in those. They're not waterproof, as you can see with the mesh, but they dry out really quickly, so even when your feet get wet, and they will get wet obviously, but it's not for long, and I feel like that's something that helps to prevent blisters too. There are a couple of questions related to Otto and hiking with the dog. First off, what breed of dog is Otto? He's most likely a mix of a Dachshund and a Jack Russell Terrier, but I don't know exactly, and there's probably a lot of different breeds in him because I adopted him from Croatia. He lived there in a shelter. He was a stray dog, and I adopted him when he was just over 3 years old. Then another question, what challenges did you face on your adventure as a result of having Otto with you? And then related to that, were there many places where Otto wasn't allowed, stores, etc.? And how did you overcome that? And also, how did you find it with Otto when you needed to go into shops or the hospital? Challenges when you're hiking with the dog. Basically it's, and I think it's really important to see it that way, is that you're basically hiking your dog's hike, because you can't, there are a lot of challenges that come with that. For example, I can't plan too much ahead because I know that it's not just about my own pace and mood of the day, but it's also obviously about Otto, and he can't do 50 kilometers every day. I don't know if I could do that, but just as an example. So yeah, there's that. Then you have to be more organized, find food for your dog, or as I did, send yourself resupply parcels, which mean more organization before setting off or during the hike. Then obviously if your dog doesn't carry his own food, then you have to carry a bit more food and more water, of course, and more gear, because your dog has a little bit of gear too. So there's that. And then there can be specific challenges when it comes to your dog itself. Like for example, Otto is afraid of shooting noises because Otto was shot at before I adopted him. So before he went to the shelter, someone must have shot him because he has still a little bullet under his skin. So yeah, he's afraid of shooting noise, which is completely normal for him, but that can be very challenging. So that's something that you have to work around and deal with. So yeah, to summarize it, it's just not about you, but there's a good amount of thought and organization and everything that goes into the dog if you hike with the dog. As for the places that didn't allow dogs, actually, and that's one of the reasons too why I love hiking in the UK. The UK is incredibly dog friendly, and I didn't have, I mean, sometimes there's not a lot of options, but I never had a problem for hotels or for cafes with Otto. But of course there's always places like shops, and when I had to go to the hospital, obviously Otto couldn't go in there. That's a bit of an issue because if you're traveling alone like I did, there's always, of course, I'm always a bit scared that someone will take Otto when I leave him outside the store. But yeah, what else can I do? I don't have a good solution for that. I just hope and think that most people are good people and will not steal a dog that's waiting outside. And another thing that I do obviously is do my shopping when I'm in a shop to get food or anything, to do as quickly as possible, or if it's a bigger store, I just go back to the front entrance just to, if possible, to peek through the window to see if he's still there, if everything's okay. Something I can really relate to, like the fear of your dog being stolen, obviously, but yeah, I just try to see the positive in people. But I feel like for smaller towns or even villages, that's much less of a problem. And for bigger cities, what I oftentimes do is I go to a store that's not in the city center, but a little bit outside, even if that means a longer way, or going there by bus, just to find a store where there's not a lot of people outside. And another thing that I feel like helps with that too, and with the whole topic, is training. Otto is used to waiting outside the store for me, and he doesn't mind at all. He just will sit there and just stare at the entrance and wait for me. So that obviously helps too if your dog's not panicking or not barking the whole time, but just quietly sits in a little corner. That helps a lot too. And then next up, we're almost done. How and what equipment do you use to edit your footage on the trail? And are you going to write a book on your adventure? For the book right now, no, I think I will be focusing on making more videos and filming those. So yeah, that's not planned right now. For the technical side of my videos, I'm using a GoPro to film everything, and I have an external microphone that was broken twice, but in theory I would use that. And to edit the footage on trail, I just use my iPad with the Apple Pencil, and for the software I'm really happy with LumaFusion. It really works great on the iPad, and I did all my editing with that. Another interesting question is, any issues for you and Otto adjusting back to house life? Do you and Otto have post-trail depression? We adjusted really well to house life. I think we both were ready for a little rest, and yeah, we didn't have any problems settling in back into normal life. But that being said, it didn't take long for us to go on other adventures, and I'm about to edit the footage for those, so there's a couple of more videos coming on our adventures that we did these past few weeks. As for post-trail depression, I've had it pretty strong last year after my coast path hike, to the point where I had to make some big changes in my life, and yeah, that basically led to me leaving my job that I wasn't really happy in anymore, and that wasn't really a great fit. So I've really had it back then. This time I actually didn't have it, because I think what made a huge difference for me is that I knew that I wasn't coming back to my old life, like a job that to be honest, I didn't like that much, but I'm now building my own thing, following my true passion. So I didn't have that post-trail depression now, but I'm just excited to work on that, work at things that I'm good at, that I really enjoy and I'm passionate about, and that helped a lot. Then another question that's really interesting too is, what is the hiking and wild camping like in Germany? Is wild camping tolerated? Are there any multi-day walks or trails you would recommend there? I feel like probably there are a lot of German hikers now that will have a different opinion on that, but for me personally, I think wild camping in Germany is a lot harder than in England, because I feel like less people do it, and it's definitely not as tolerated as it is in England. That's my experience. Wild camping in Germany is not legal. There are a couple of specific regulations in the different federal states. Depending on the area, there can be fines that are really high, especially in like national parks or protected areas. The authorities just are a little bit more focused on that too, if that makes sense. So I feel like it's a bit harder in general. There are a lot of multi-day walks in Germany. One that I can really recommend is the Schluchtensteig, which is in the south of Germany in the Black Forest area. So there's quite a bit of elevation. There's a lot of really great woodland areas there, obviously. So that's something that I can really recommend. And also the Westweg, which is also in the Black Forest, that runs from north to south all the way down to the border to Switzerland. It's a traverse of the Black Forest, and there are a lot of mountains on there too that are well over 1,000 meters above sea level, so that's really interesting. And a trail that I've heard a lot of things about that's supposed to be really nice, but I didn't do it, but that's definitely on my list too, is the Harzer Hexenstieg, which is more in the northern part of Germany, where it's very hilly. There are mountains there. There's really nice woodland areas, so that's something that's on my list too. And that leads us to the last question that I have been asked several times. What's your next adventure? What plans do we have next? And that's a really interesting question, because obviously I had a trail bucket list that just got longer and longer as I was hiking across the UK, but I didn't have any specific trails. Like I just knew, okay, I want to do that again, I want to do this again, I want to do that trail. But now within the last few weeks, I've actually narrowed it down and planned the next hikes. So my next projects, I don't know when I'm going to do that. But definitely I want to do a winter hike in Germany, in the south of Germany, probably in the Black Forest or maybe the Harzer Hexenstieg. So I'm going to do that as a winter hike, preferably in the snow. So we'll see about that. It just snowed over the weekend quite a bit. And then for next year, I'm definitely hiking a section of a Camino, the Via de la Plata, with my dad. Definitely hiking a bit with him in Spain. That's probably for early autumn. And for spring, I have planned a few things. The West Highland Way again, because I feel like since I've had my big foot problems last year and also I was going in the opposite direction, I feel like I couldn't enjoy it as much as I would have wanted, because the West Highland Way is just a beautiful trail, so I'm walking that probably as a winter hike too, because we're going end of March. And then I registered for the Great Outdoors Challenge, which is a self-supported hike across Scotland from the west coast to the east coast. So you basically create your own route and you have 2 weeks to complete that. So I'm doing that in May, unfortunately without Otto, because dogs aren't allowed on the event, on the hike. I'm really excited for that. And then I definitely want to do the coast to coast and the Cumbria Way, probably in April or May too. And I'm also interested in the Southern Upland Way. I don't know for these three, I don't know the exact dates or the exact timeline, but I'm definitely going to spend a couple of months in the UK, probably from late March to June, to do a lot of trails and explore new areas, and I'm really excited for that. Another big topic I was asked about was my gear and things that worked for me or didn't work for me, things I had to change or replace, and I'm going to make a specific video for that. That's going to be the next video on here in a few days, because otherwise that video now would have been too long. So stay tuned for the next video in a couple of days, where I will be talking about my gear and things I've changed or I will change moving forward. I hope I could answer your questions. If there's anything else or if anything new came up, just let me know in the comments and I will try and answer those. For now, thank you so much for watching and see you next time. Bye!